Well, good morning. It's wonderful to be here as the sun streams through the window. It's a beautiful morning, and we're very pleased and thankful for the invitation to be here, myself and Cheryl. I understand that as a church, you're going through the theme of becoming, and that's a great theme. And before we get into the sermon, we need to read from the Word. So we're going to be looking at Isaiah 55 today. I will read it and feel free to follow. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread, and your labour on what does not satisfy? Listen to me, and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Hear me, that your soul may live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful love promised to David. See, I have made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander of the peoples. Surely you will summon nations you know not, and nations that do not know you will hasten to you. Because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has endowed you with splendor. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the evil man his thoughts. Let him turn to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will freely pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. As the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return to it without watering the earth and making it bud and flourish, so that it yields seed for the sower and bread for the eater, so is my word that goes out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. You will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Instead of the thorn bush will grow the pine tree, and instead of briar, the Lord's renown, for an everlasting sign which will not be destroyed. So, the theme of becoming, I think, is seen in that passage as well. And I understand you've been talking about becoming Christ-like. But the gospel has a theme of becoming that's not just for us as individuals, but us for communities, and indeed for the whole of creation. And if we look from the very start of the Bible, that's the message that God gives us right through his word. He has a plan of redemption and transformation from creation, through the nation of Israel and the mission he gives them, to the ministry, cross and resurrection of Jesus. And it's that ministry and the cross and resurrection of Jesus that provides the power to truly transform and redeem lives. And then we have the mission of the church. We're called to be God's people, bringing that message of transformation in word and in demonstrating it in our own lives, in deeds of justice, in deeds of love and compassion that mirror those of Jesus. And the promise of a new creation, it means that what we do, those deeds of justice, compassion and love, they're not wasted, but God gives them value and worth in the present through the revealing of the future. And that conviction that the work that we do now in God's name will be a part of his great redeeming work and also the demonstrating of his kingdom here is what lies behind the work of Tear Fund and the work of our partners. The working for justice for dignity, health, and peace. All of that is declaring the truth of the hope that is given to us about the future that is to come when all of these things will be experienced in their fullness. Now, I'm here today to talk about the work of our partner in South Sudan, Across. And I want to thank you for the commitment and the faithful support you have given to that work over some time. Across is an organisation that has for more than 50 years brought light to periods of darkness in Sudan and then South Sudan. And their people are people of commitment and faith who live in places that are remote and difficult. And they do that to demonstrate the love of God each day as they work in communities. Now, I understand that you saw a snippet of, maybe the next one as well. You saw a snippet of a video, and there's a whole video that it's not polished, it's not brilliant. It's one I did on my phone when I was in South Sudan in February and March. And it shows the work that Across is doing. And in there is this man, Andrew. He's the project coordinator. And he said at the end of the video, people's lives are changing. Children are going to school. People's health is improving. People are producing their own food rather than depending on what people give to them. People even have vegetable gardens. When I was there in February and March, I came away so encouraged by what I saw, the changes and the things that are happening in the communities with the people. I was humbled by the commitment of the staff, and I was challenged by the situation of the people I saw. I do a fair bit of travelling for my work with Tear Fund. I'm responsible for learning and evaluations and looking at the effectiveness of our work. And in most times I can go to somewhere and come back and the transition is very easy. But coming back from South Sudan, I was struck by the situation of the people and by the levels of poverty that were very challenging. So South Sudan itself, 90% South Sudan is stuck between Sudan and Ethiopia, so it's sort of the the eastern part of Africa. It's a new country, relatively, 13 years old, but it's a country of huge need, and you can see there 90% of the population living on $4.65 a day. That's Australian dollars. In terms of multidimensional poverty, we use this index. It's the multidimensional poverty index. The idea of it is that poverty is not just measured in finance, but in all sorts of other things. So health, attendance at school, assets that you have, the type of house you have, what you use for cooking. Now, the index for South Sudan is 0.580. That doesn't mean much, but if you think of other countries you might know, Thailand is 0.002. India, a country that we think of as a country that is poor, is 0.069. So we're talking deep, deep poverty. So for the people of South Sudan, when we think back to this passage, how inviting is the idea and the invitation, come all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Listen to me and eat what is good, and you will delight in the richest of fare. That's an invitation to a place of abundance. It's a transformation from thirst to being fulfilled, from hunger and poverty to eating the richest of fare. Now for us, I know myself, I've never really been hungry or really thirsty. So it's hard to comprehend the power and the blessing of that invitation. But it's declaring of grace abounding. And then it turns to a call to mission so that others will see the splendour that God has brought. And this, in South Sudan, is what people are starting to experience. It's not just an empty call or an empty invitation, but it's one that's giving people water to eat, drink and food to eat. When I was doing the evaluation in February, a man called Majak said this: "Previously, we used to have gaps of hunger, but now the produce from our farms are there as a reserve to cover those gaps, and hunger, sickness, and paying for school fees for our children. I always think to improve the produce instead of loitering in the town centre or in Juba. My life has changed from a state of hunger to daily bread throughout the year." And so through Across's work, people are starting to accept that invitation. It's real. The food to eat. You can see these women who are proudly showing off all the grains that they have been able to purchase. They're actually they've bought them when food is plenty, and they're cleverly hoarding them and are going to sell them when food is scarce. So they're going to make a significant profit, which will help them with the school fees, with paying for whatever they need to pay for. The image presented to us in Isaiah 55, those first 5 verses, is one of plenty. There's health and people are living together. People who do not know you will hasten to you. People who you do not know will hasten to you to see that splendour, it says. And in Rumbek, the place where the project is based, people from other villages and other counties are coming to those places, those villages, to learn what the people there are doing. What have they learnt? And how are they making these changes in their lives? As well as food, there's health. Across links health with livelihoods, because they believe that if you can increase your livelihood and the income, then you'll increase your health. That those two things are inextricably linked. They run a clinic, which you can see there in the background. This is a group of people meeting in front of the clinic. And they provide maternity care and vaccinations, as well as health awareness. John, who spoke during the evaluation, said, "Across trained us in planting trees and irrigation of green vegetables, and Across has trained us in cleaning before we were dirty. Compared to now, they also trained us to wash the dishes before we cook, and we have been trained in digging the latrine for prevention of diseases. Since we have the clinic, nobody goes to the magicians anymore. Also, since Across came, nobody goes again to the farm to go to the toilet because we have our latrines. We're now eating green vegetables. Since Across came, we take our sick people to the clinic, and we suffer no more like we did before." So previously, people would go to the fields to go to the toilet, and that was especially difficult for the women, who would have to go in the dark very early in the morning or at night. And obviously that was quite dangerous as well for those women. And the fields themselves and the compounds were dirty. So that has changed as Across has encouraged people to build their latrines, learn about sanitation and hygiene, all very basic stuff you might think, but stuff that is transformational for people in their health and their well-being. Rebecca, and this is Rebecca, you can see there in front of her toilet. And it's not easy to build a toilet in these places. The ground is really hard, and a latrine needs to be 4 metres deep, and they dig themselves without machinery. So she has done this, and she's got a tippy tap there so that she can wash her hands afterwards. Her whole family is now using it, and she said, before a cross came, I used to have diarrhea, allergies and skin rashes, but now that has changed since I made proper cleaning at the house and personal hygiene. I now clean cooking materials, bed sheets and the compound and drink clean water, and I'm using a latrine. Before the training, I had one room and I was sharing it with goats and chickens. Then I was trained to learn that animals are dirty, so I managed to construct my own house and leave the other room for goats and animals. The passage also talks about a need for us to change ourselves. Seek the Lord while he may be found, call on him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way and the evil man his thoughts. Let him turn to the Lord and he will have mercy on him. And to our God, for he will freely pardon. We need to be able to change ourselves to bring about a transformation in our lives and in our communities. And this is true in a spiritual sense. To know God's grace, we need to turn to him and accept and acknowledge our own failings. But this occurs physically as well, as we recognise our own weaknesses and failings, as we ask for forgiveness and humbly allow God to make us the people he wants us to be. We find that we live better with others as well. One of the things that struck me powerfully about my time with a cross was the importance of peace in being the enabler for everything that people want to do. Now, South Sudan has been engaged in conflict and deep conflict for, decades. The fighting with the North, when it was just one country in Sudan. And then since then, there's been political and clan-based violence as well and conflict. And people there kept on talking about the times when they couldn't go to the market, when they couldn't visit their neighbours in the next village, when they couldn't visit their families who may have lived in another county. They talked about the times where the men were either away fighting or in hiding in the bush so that they didn't get caught up in it. Conflict, it becomes very clear when you talk to people who live in it, doesn't just stop communities from working, but breaks them. So the difference when there is peace, you will go out in joy and be led forth in peace. The mountains and hills will burst into song before you, and all the trees of the field will clap their hands. Instead of thorns, there'll be pine trees. Instead of thorn bushes, instead of briars, there'll be myrtle. And these verses talk about what happens when there's a transformation as a result of God's grace and God's work. And it can be seen in the fulfillment when everything is accomplished as God desires, as he says in verse 11. But it can be seen now too, as we work together, as we work to build peaceful and whole communities. As part of their work, Across forms peace committees in communities. They're trained in skills like conflict recognition and resolution. They run peace conferences where they get communities together to discuss issues that might be arising so that they're proactively trying to solve conflict before it happens. And these issues range from large-scale ones, if there's been cattle rustling or community issues are arising. They've been able to reduce the number of weapons in the communities, and they resolve fights at boreholes over water and who's getting too much water. And they support women in preventing or responding to domestic violence. One of the Peace Committee members told us, there is a great change in terms of conflicting communities visiting each other. You can visit your relative from a different community now. I'm free to do farming. to support my family that I couldn't do some years back. Death was the order of the day, but now no one is getting killed. Stealing of animals is stopped, and there is intermarriage between neighbouring communities. And most striking, and linking back to the passage in Isaiah, was one peace committee member who said, "We have learnt that peacemakers are those who have love, and we're trained on how to help people forgive one another, and that has changed our community." So this will be for the Lord's renown, for an everlasting sign that will endure forever. Across works to see change happen now, but the staff of Across have an eye on the purpose of that as well. Andrew, who I showed you at the beginning, said, "We work as we love people. In Christ we are told to be humble and to feel about others, so to empathise with them. When they are in trouble, we feel it." The work of Across is an example of that. And that's echoed by the work of Tear Fund's 50 other partners around the world in 21 countries, as they faithfully seek to demonstrate the reality of the invitation that God gives us in Isaiah 55. It's also echoed by us as well here, by you here at Billabong. The theme of becoming, I've been here before, I've preached here before. It was 20 years ago when it was in a marquee. Billabong itself is becoming what God wants it to be here in this community. And God has a purpose and a mission and a task for each one of us, wherever we are. Here in Canning Vale, in your workplaces, in your homes, in your communities, wherever else we are sent, so that we can see that invitation from Isaiah 55 come to fruition in some part now, so that in the future it will be seen in fullness. I'm going to invite Cheryl to come and talk a little bit more about some of that work, and so I'll hand over to her.
Good morning, everyone. And thanks, Phil. That was really encouraging to see and to hear some of the ways that we respond, the ways that we respond in our discipleship that has small but transformative impacts on people's lives. So thank you for that. My name is Cheryl, and I'll start by talking a little bit about who Tear Fund is, what we do, how we work, what we think good development entails, and what that might have to do with our discipleship. And we'll wrap up with a short video. So Tear Fund is an aid and development organization that works in partnership to end poverty, challenge inequality, and build sustainable communities. Its vision is for a more just and compassionate world, where all people everywhere have the opportunity to achieve their God-given potential and to flourish. And Tear Fund does this by following Jesus, choosing to work where the need is greatest, acting with courage to tackle injustice so that all may experience that fullness of life that Jesus talks about. As a faith-based organization, Tear Fund Australia seeks to adhere to and be guided by biblical teaching and to evaluate its works and attitudes in that light. It has an organizational commitment to the 10 values listed here. And these values are embedded in every aspect of the work that we do here in Australia and around the world. So Tear Fund currently supports about 100 projects through 51 partner organizations in about 21 countries, spanning Africa, South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, as well as here in Australia through our First Peoples program and church and community engagement. We work in partnership with locally based Christian agencies to bring about meaningful change. And this is based on our belief that local people better understand the needs of their communities, are better able to connect with local people and organizations, and work in ways that are appropriate to the local culture. And at Tear Fund, you can probably go on to the next slide. Thank you. At Tear Fund, we talk about this framework of right relationships quite a bit, where we understand poverty as the breakdown of relationships, and that the work that God is about in this world is the restoration and reconciliation of relationships in these 4 areas: between us and God, us and ourselves, us and others, and us and the rest of creation. It is that vision of shalom where these relationships are made full, whole, and complete that is what God is doing in this world and which He invites His church into. And at Tear Fund, this shapes our approach to development. We believe that a biblical vision of good development is founded on relationships, and that relationships is a space within which the things of integrity, gentleness, humility, solidarity, and meekness are lived out. It is this relational lens through which Tear Fund responds to poverty and injustice and works for a more just and compassionate world. And what does this faith-integrated good development look like on the ground? Well, it looks like listening deeply to people and communities, giving people voice, agency, and opportunity for them to lead the change that they want to see. Us realizing that there often are no easy answers in a highly complex space, acknowledging that relationship building takes time, and that often what God calls us to, especially in being prophetic in this space, requires courage to at times do and sit with difficult things. And so a very sensible and very appropriate question you might be asking right now is, but what does good development have to do with me? Well, I'd like to propose that good development has got everything to do with how we live faithfully in this world. Because if at the heart of good development lies the restoration of right relationships, and right relationships that bring fullness of life is what God is working out in this world, then the posture of what good development entails must reflect our posture of discipleship if our lives are to reflect with integrity the image of God that each and every one of us bear. So while Tear Fund is an aid and development organization, it is also fundamentally a growing movement of ordinary Christians, just like you and I, across Australia, who, as part of the living out of our discipleship, want to see God's kingdom come here on earth as it is in heaven. And so we thought that we might end with a short video, which hopefully brings together who Tear Fund is, how we work, and how you might participate. Thank you.
So let's talk about the cycle of poverty for a moment. You see, a cycle is a series. It is one thing that leads to another, and back to the beginning, stuck on repeat. It is a vinyl with a scratch. It's always going to come back, stuck on repeat. It is no isolated incident of economic harshness. It's an embedded generational reality. And so, friends, if we are to truly do something about this cycle, then it will require more than just an isolated incident of economic relief. There is no short-term fix to this. Bringing hope to the hard places requires resilience, no band-aid solution. It is hard work over many, many years. It is sweat and blood and tears. Long-term transformation takes long-term support, a journey of change. And it's to this journey which we invite you. Tear Fund Restorers, a community of passionate Christians dedicated to dismantling this cycle. Not just once-off giving, as helpful as that may be, but a commitment to consistently support the life transformational work of Tear Fund and their partners on the ground. Restorers are simply supporters stuck on repeat. Justice on repeat. Hope on repeat. Generosity on repeat. Will you join us? Become a Tear Fund Restorer, giving monthly, giving consistently, joining in God's work of restoration. Let's see that cycle broken for the many, many, many who are still stuck on repeat.